Hello, and welcome to a new episode of The Bike Show, in which I'll be updating you about this Yamaha's MT-09 that I'm running as a long-termer. I'll also be answering a viewer's question towards the end of the show. Don will be keeping us up to date with what's going on with Hero motorcycles in South Africa. But first, some international motorcycling news that, as always seems to be the case these days, involves electric motorcycles, which is why I've decided to start this episode the good old-fashioned way, with some selfish, pointless, but very enjoyable fossil fuel burning. I simply cannot condone riding like that. It was very irresponsible of me, and so I shall atone for my juvenile behaviour and reiterate that we must all do our bit for the future of the planet. And so that's why our news this week begins with electric bikes. Although, you'll be glad to know, it concerns electric bikes with a focus on some serious performance. Let's face it, the only way to get many of us onto electric bikes is going to be through making them at least as exciting to ride as our current petrol-powered machines. You can bang on about saving dolphins and preserving the pretty flowers and making the world a better place for our kids. Well, your kids actually, because I don't have any. But although that stuff is worthy and we all believe in it to some degree or another, the big brains of the planet can solve all these problems much more realistically and quickly by giving us some genuinely viable alternatives. But I will just note that the EU has announced that no new fossil fuel burning cars will be sold after 2035. And that's really not that far away. The UK, incidentally, before the EU in this instance, has said that that date will also apply to new motorcycle sales. So we need to see some serious thought and investment being put into the infrastructure to support this inevitable change. Yeah, but what am I thinking? We can't even get electricity supply to our homes and businesses reliably, so yeah, let's not confuse matters even further by bringing vehicles into the mix just yet. First, we have an update from Ducati about its V21L race bike that is destined to fill the MotoE grid next season as Ducati replaces Energica as the supplier in what is currently a one-make series. We've seen the bike in action briefly on the track before, but now Ducati has released some actual details about the performance. During testing at Mugello, the top speed reached by the end of its legendary straight was 275 kilometers an hour. Significantly better than the current MotoE bikes that apparently top out just shy of 260 k's an hour. There are obviously some goals that Ducati has set itself and that Dorna, the organisers, have also set for the bike's performance, and so far things are looking good. The idea is for the MotoE bikes to no longer post the slowest lap times. They're currently not even matching the Moto3 times. So Ducati has said it initially wants to have them circulating somewhere between what a Moto3 and a Moto2 bike can manage, and that's going to be pretty damn quick. Dorna wants the bikes to weigh in at 237 kilos or less, and it seems that Ducati has blitzed that requirement already with a weight of 225 kilos. In terms of power, you're looking at an equivalent 150 horsepower, which comes with a solid 140 newton meters of torque, available instantly, of course. That in turn means it should be hugely rapid off the start line, and if rumours are to be believed, it already has the MotoGP machine nailed in that respect. The battery pack weighs 110 kilos and is made of 1,152 cells like those used by Tesla in its cars, and they give a capacity of 18 kilowatt hours. That's more than any electric bike currently in production, other than the new Energica Xperia long-range touring model that has a 22.5 kilowatt hour battery. A 20 kilowatt charging socket can be found in the rear tail hump, and that means it can recharge from empty to 80% in just 3/4 of an hour. The battery provides 800 volts of power to the 21 kilogram electric motor that can spin up to 18,000 RPM, and it has a single speed transmission. This motor and the inverter have their own cooling systems, as does the battery pack, given that they heat up in different ways to different maximums and at different rates. One of the problems with the current Energica bikes is that the battery packs get so hot that they need to be left to cool down for some time before they can even be recharged. This Ducati can be plugged in as soon as it returns to the pits. In terms of chassis, there's a monocoque construction with the steering bolted onto the front and a swing arm and the seat unit at the rear. A mix of aluminium and carbon fibre is used, as you'd expect. Suspension and brakes are pretty much also what you'd expect of a cutting-edge Italian sport bike. So you get top spec Erlin suspension at both ends, much like you would find on the company's Superleggera V4, and a set of really trick Brembo brakes that feature massive 338.5mm front discs that are thicker than normal to allow for some internal fins in the disc to help them cool more efficiently. There is of course a full suite of the latest electronics to round off a race package that looks like it just needs a few more testing kilometres under its belt in order to be ready for the 2023 season, when there will be 18 of them on the MotoE grid. There's no data as to range, I notice, although it's obviously long enough to last the 35k's or so of the average race. MotoE races are undoubtedly a bit harder on the batteries than even a skilled lunatic would be on the road, but I would think that having a range that would be livable within the real world is still some time away. Give it at least 2 seasons of learning and development in MotoE before you see an electric Ducati sport bike like this that you would be able to buy or even want to buy. And since we're talking electric sport bikes, we can't ignore Triumph's latest press release about its own TE1 project. We've reported on it a couple of times during the past year, and it seems the bike is now finished, tested, and the company is, it seems, very pleased with itself. And why not? Because it looks great, if remarkably familiar. It may be revolutionary propulsion for the Brit company, but the looks are most definitely evolutionary. So it's exactly as you would imagine an electrically powered speed triple should look. Triumph has been tight-lipped about any actual numbers for the TE1 until this point, but now the project is finished, they have let us know that it has a peak horsepower of 175, pretty much the same as the speed triple and 25 more than the Ducati, you'll notice. There's 109 Newton meters of torque, which seems okay. Nothing special considering the new speed triple makes 125 Newton meters, but electricity, so 109 Newton meters is available at 1 RPM on that first little twist of the throttle, so there is that. Weight isn't bad considering that this is the Achilles heel of all electric bikes, so we've got 220 kilos, which is only 21 kilos heavier than the speed triple for reference. In terms of measured performance, Triumph says that it recorded 0 to 60 miles an hour in a time of 3.6 seconds and 0 to 100 in 6.2. This is quick, but it's not groundbreakingly fast, especially considering the electronics now available to control wheeling and wheel spin. Triumph did say that more setting up of electronics could have reduced those numbers just a touch, but that does beg the question, why didn't they? Overall, they're claiming the project is a huge success. And to be fair, the bike is both lovely and apparently suitably rapid while also handling very well. It is obviously, though, a disappointment to fans of electric bikes and Triumph fans in particular that the TE1 won't immediately go into production in some form, but it's a solid step along the way to that actually happening for sure. The things I haven't mentioned, and which everyone always understandably wants to know about electric bikes, are the capacity of its batteries and their range and recharging time. All I can see from the press release is that the battery in this TE1 will recharge from empty to 80% full in a remarkably rapid 20 minutes. That's obviously via some kind of fast charger, but there's no details on that. And is the 20-minute time so low because the battery is relatively small? And does that now tie in with the low weight of the whole package because it features a relatively small battery? As for the range, Triumph says that it's 160 kilometers on a full charge, but under what kind of riding conditions? 160 kilometers of riding at a track? Call me suspicious, but with the weight and recharging time, I find that highly unlikely. We all know already I know from my own limited experience of electric bikes, and I've read enough to know the problem exists in the car world too, you simply can't trust or really accurately interpret what the manufacturers say about range, which is a shame. Surely a bit of honesty from the manufacturers amidst all the overblown marketing hype wouldn't go amiss. Anyway, it's those grey areas, the missing numbers in the Triumph press release, that make me think that the technology simply isn't there yet. Range and recharging times still have some way to go before viable large capacity equivalent motorcycles hit the market at affordable prices. Urban transport, scooters in other words, yes, the range versus performance issue is less of a hindrance, and something like BMW CE04 that I rode recently is viable if you live and work and travel within the city boundaries, but it's still expensive, remember. So over the next 5 to 10 years, I hope, if not exactly expect, to see prices come down and the technology to improve sufficiently for big bikes with a genuine 300 kilometre plus range and 15-minute recharge times to hit the market. And, of course, we need the infrastructure to catch up with what will then be enormous demand. And at the moment, the number of new charging stations, at least here in Europe, is not keeping pace with the number of new electric vehicles hitting our roads. It's all very promising, all very exciting, and although I love internal combustion engines in bikes, I have no problem at all with the idea of riding electric bikes as long as I get at least the same amount of performance and range. And ideally, I don't need to take a book with me everywhere to keep myself occupied while it recharges. We're not quite there yet, but I have no doubt we will eventually get there. Hopefully in time to meet the politicians' time limit of 2035. In the meantime, petrol is on the menu in parts 2 and 3 of the show after this short break.